There's one other thing I want to show you around these server actions, and it's related to error handling. So we just added in some code to do some validation, but if we ever fail validation, we're just returning a plain value, as you see right here. There's some other errors that can occur inside of a server action. For example, when we try to save data into our database, we might just completely fail due to some uniqueness constraint, or maybe we don't have a connection to the database. A lot of things can go wrong with this line of code. So let's see what happens if we comment that out and then just simulate an error by throwing one manually. Like so. So if I save this and flip back over and then try to submit my form now, oh, I do have to add in the title and code. There we go. So now if I try to submit, we're going to get this really big pop-up. So ideally, we wouldn't see something like this. We should really just print up the error message in some meaningful way that a user can kind of look at it and understand, oh, something went wrong. Like for some reason, I failed to save information in the database. Ideally, to a user, we might just say, sorry, but we failed to create the record. We don't have to specifically say, sorry, but the database connection failed. So I want to take a look at two different ways in which we can better handle errors like this. The first way is going to be by using another one of these very specially named files inside of our app folder. So we've gone over several of these now. We've covered page, layout, not found, and loading. Now we're going to take a look at error. The error.tsx file will be automatically rendered whenever some unhandled error occurs inside of one of our components. All we have to do is create this error file inside of our app directory. So back inside my editor, I'm going to find my new folder right here, and I'm going to create a new file inside there. I'm going to call it error.tsx. Unlike many of these other special files that we've covered, the error file must be a client component. That is a hard requirement. So as soon as you create that error.tsx file, make sure you get in use client at the very top. Then we're going to export default function called error page. This is going to be called with two different props, and I'll make an interface at the top immediately to describe them. The first automatically included prop is an error object. So that's going to contain some information about exactly what went wrong. We also then get another prop called reset. That's going to be a function. The reset is going to allow us to kind of automatically refresh a route. Usually we add in a button that a user can click on, and whenever a user does, we would usually run this reset function. Right now, let's just focus on printing up this error message so we can communicate to the user exactly what went wrong. I'm going to receive that error prop, and I'll make sure I describe this prop types with error page props. And then for right now, I'll just return a div that prints out error.message. Okay, let's save that. And as usual, back over to the browser for a quick test. Now, if I enter in some title and code and try to create, I will see, oops, up here instead. So that was the message of the error that I threw right underneath our call to the database. So usually we would see some kind of error message right here. Ideally have it say something like, hey, sorry, but we failed to save your record. Go try again. Now, even though this is kind of convenient, there's also a huge downside to it. When we show this error.tsx file, we stop showing whatever page we were displaying before. So a user now, in this case, doesn't really have the ability to try to resubmit the form. They can't see the snippet create page component at all anymore. So even though being able to create this error.tsx file is kind of handy because it's going to capture these errors and display a message to a user, they're not that great because it's not kind of giving the user the ability to fix up or kind of try to submit the form again very easily. So let's now take a look at a slightly different way to handle this error. The second way that we're going to handle this error is by going back over to our server action. Now remember what we learned about server actions when they are making use of the useFormState hook. If anything goes wrong inside of a server action, we can have them return a value, and it just needs to have the same type as whatever that initial state type was that we passed into our hook. So in this case, we are using an object that has a message property. It doesn't always have to be that. That's just what we are using in this case. So if we want to display some kind of error message to the user, including something that says, oh, sorry, but we failed to save your record in the database, we just need to make sure that from this function, from the create snippet server action, we don't throw an error. We don't want to throw an error. We want to return an object with a message property. And whatever we return there is going to be displayed on the screen to a user. So keep this in your mind. This is super important when you start implementing error handling. If you want to communicate anything, including some result of an error from the server component, or from the server action back to your component, you just need to return a normal value. You are not going to throw an error. So let me show you how we do that. I'm going to, right here, put in a try block. I'm then going to go on down to our error here and close that off and capture the error. And I'm going to annotate the error's type as unknown. I'm then going to fix some indentation. There we go. So now if anything goes wrong up here around validation, if we throw an error for some reason because we are using some library that automatically throws errors when we validate data, or if an error is thrown when we try to save some data into the database, now we're going to end up here in this catch statement. And that gives us the ability to easily return a value as opposed to just throwing an error, which will not be handled the way we probably want it to. So now we can use a little bit of type narrowing with TypeScript to take a look at the error's type and extract some information from it and return it in one of those message objects. I'll say if error is an instance of error, then return an object with a message property of error.message. Otherwise, just return an object that has a message that says something went wrong. I'm also going to change the text on the error that we are manually throwing up here to something like failed to save to database, just to make it slightly more realistic than oops. Okay, let's test this out now. So back over here, if I now enter in my title and some amount of code, I'll see failed to save to database, which is a much better user experience than the complete form disappearing from the screen that just said oops previously. So again, wherever possible, from these server actions, we really want to return plain values when we are making use of that use form state hook, and we really do not want to throw errors. One last thing, very quick aside, and this is kind of why I'm showing you this technique at all, because I bet on your own you would have kind of figured this out and you would have known, okay, I need to capture an error and get information from it back over to my component. But the gotcha here is, believe it or not, the redirect function. So take a look at this. I'm going to cut my redirect and I'm going to put it right above error, like so. I'll then go back over, refresh the page, and now I'm going to click on create again, and we get some really interesting results here. So I really want you to memorize this string right here, next_redirect. Why are we seeing this? Here's why. The redirect function works in a kind of unexpected way. Whenever you call redirect, it's not internally just saying, oh, I need to redirect the user. Instead, it is throwing a very special kind of error, an error that Next is watching for. And whenever it sees that very special error, Next internally says, oh, this isn't actually an error. Something didn't actually go wrong. The user or the developer just wants to redirect the user over to some other page. So if you ever put a redirect function call into a try catch statement, then your catch is going to capture the error that got thrown by the redirect, and you're not going to actually redirect anywhere. So we do not want to put our redirect statements into a try catch. We always want to leave them outside, like so. Okay, so that's it. I apologize for this long video. Last thing we'll do, I'm going to delete that error, and we will restore this back to just creating the snippet. And one thing that's been bugging me, we're not actually using that snippet variable, so we can just go ahead and delete that. Okay, so that's it. Let's save this. One last quick test here. Put in new snippet with some code, and it works. Very good.